Sir, step away from that desk. You can't just go through people's files.
These aren't people's files. They're my case notes.
Case notes? In a courthouse? You a clerk or something?
No, I'm here to argue the motion in courtroom 4.
Hold on, you're saying you're an attorney?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Doesn't seem like it.
And yet here I am, the defense attorney you just assumed.
Officer Vincent Caldwell had been working courthouse security in Philadelphia for 14 years, the last 9 stationed at the Criminal Justice Center on Filbert Street. He'd accumulated 17 complaints in those 9 years. 17 separate incidents where Black attorneys, Latino public defenders, and Asian legal aid lawyers were stopped, questioned, and accused of being in restricted areas when they were simply doing their jobs. Every complaint had been dismissed as a communication issue. The court administration called him dedicated. His supervisor called him attentive to detail. No one called him what he was: a gatekeeper who couldn't imagine that lawyers came in colors other than white. On a Wednesday morning in downtown Philadelphia, everything about Vincent Caldwell's protected position unraveled completely. Elijah Rousseau had just arrived at the Criminal Justice Center to argue a critical pretrial motion that could determine whether his client spent the next decade in prison or walked free. He was a criminal defense attorney with his own practice, 12 years of experience, and a reputation for meticulous preparation and courtroom skill. He'd won acquittals in cases other lawyers wouldn't touch. He'd argued before appellate courts. He'd been quoted in the Philadelphia Inquirer about criminal justice reform. That morning, he was a Black man in his late 30s wearing a navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase, reviewing his case files at a desk in the attorney preparation room. And to Officer Vincent Caldwell, that only meant one thing: he didn't belong there. That false assumption triggered a confrontation that would end in Caldwell's termination, a formal complaint to the State Bar Association, and a $4 million lawsuit that would expose the systemic bias embedded in courthouse security. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Downtown Philadelphia, the Criminal Justice Center on Filbert Street, a concrete fortress where the machinery of criminal law ground through hundreds of cases every day. Preliminary hearings, arraignments, motions, trials. The building housed courtrooms, holding cells, prosecutor offices, and attorney preparation rooms where lawyers reviewed evidence and prepared for arguments. The attorney prep room on the 3rd floor was a small space with 4 desks, filing cabinets, and a copy machine. It was designated specifically for attorneys to use before court appearances. A sign on the door said "Attorney Workroom Authorized Personnel Only." Elijah Rousseau had arrived at 8:23 a.m., 37 minutes before his scheduled motion hearing. He needed the time. The case was complex. His client, a 24-year-old named Marcus, was facing armed robbery charges based on eyewitness identification that Elijah believed was fundamentally flawed. Cross-racial identification, poor lighting conditions, suggestive photo array procedures. Elijah had filed a motion to suppress the identification evidence. If he won, the prosecution's case collapsed. If he lost, his client was looking at 8 to 12 years. Elijah was 41 years old. He'd grown up in West Philadelphia, watched too many people he knew get swallowed by the criminal justice system, and decided he wanted to be the person who fought back. He'd worked his way through Temple University, then Temple Law School, graduating near the top of his class. He'd spent 3 years as a public defender before opening his own practice. He took cases other attorneys avoided: the unpopular defendants, the complicated facts, the clients who couldn't afford the big firms but deserved someone who'd fight. He'd set his briefcase on one of the desks in the attorney prep room and spread out his files. Police reports, witness statements, photo arrays, expert reports on eyewitness identification, reliability. He was making notes in the margins, cross-referencing case law, preparing his argument. His bar card was clipped to his suit pocket, visible. His name was on the court calendar, posted outside every courtroom. He belonged exactly where he was. Officer Vincent Caldwell was making his rounds on the 3rd floor when he walked past the attorney prep room. He glanced through the door's window and saw Elijah at the desk, surrounded by files, and his brain made an instant calculation. Black man, going through files, probably not supposed to be there, probably a defendant who wandered into the wrong room, or maybe someone trying to access confidential information. Definitely not an attorney. Attorneys don't look like that. Caldwell opened the door and stepped inside, his hand resting on his belt near his radio. "Sir, step away from that desk. You can't just go through people's files." Elijah looked up from his notes. He'd been so focused on his preparation that the interruption took a moment to register. Then he saw the courthouse security officer, saw the suspicion on his face, and understood immediately what was happening. He'd experienced versions of this before. Not often, but enough to recognize the pattern. These aren't people's files. Elijah kept his voice calm, professional. They're my case notes. Caldwell stepped closer, his eyes scanning the documents spread across the desk. Case notes? In a courthouse? You a clerk or something? There it was. The assumption. The automatic dismissal of the possibility that Elijah could be an attorney. The casual suggestion that he must be support staff, administrative, anything other than a lawyer preparing to argue before a judge. Elijah felt the familiar mix of frustration and weary recognition. No, I'm here to argue the motion in courtroom 4. Caldwell's expression shifted from suspicion to disbelief. Hold on, you're saying you're an attorney? That's exactly what I'm saying. Elijah gestured to the bar card clipped to his pocket. My name is Elijah Rousseau. I'm a criminal defense attorney. This is the attorney preparation room. I have a motion hearing in 32 minutes. Everything I'm doing is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Caldwell looked at the bar card, but his skepticism didn't fade. Doesn't seem like it. The words hung in the air. 3 words that said everything. Not based on evidence, not based on credentials, just a feeling, an assumption, a gut reaction that this black man couldn't possibly be an attorney. Elijah set down his pen and stood up, his full attention now on Caldwell. And yet here I am, the defense attorney you just assumed couldn't be one. Do you think courthouse officers should verify credentials before questioning attorneys? Drop your answer below. Caldwell's face hardened. Look, I don't know who you think you are, but I need to verify this. You could have stolen that bar card. People try all kinds of things in courthouses. Elijah's patience was running thin. Officer, look at my bar card. Elijah Rousseau, Pennsylvania bar number 314729. You can verify it with the State Bar website right now. You can check the court calendar posted outside courtroom 4. You can call the clerk's office. My name is on the docket. I'm listed as defense counsel for Commonwealth v. Marcus Johnson, scheduled for 9 a.m. I have every right to be in this room preparing my case. Caldwell pulled out his radio. I'm going to need to call this in. Call what in? I've identified myself. I've shown you my credentials. I've told you exactly why I'm here. What policy am I violating? You're acting defensive. I'm acting like an attorney who's being profiled while trying to prepare for a hearing that could determine whether my client spends the next decade in prison. There's a difference. Another courthouse security officer appeared at the door, drawn by Caldwell's radio call. Officer Maria Torres had been working courthouse security for 6 years and had a reputation for common sense and de-escalation. What's going on? Caldwell gestured toward Elijah. This individual claims to be an attorney, but I'm not convinced. Says he's preparing for a hearing. Torres looked at Elijah, then at the file spread across the desk, then at the bar card on his suit pocket. She walked closer and read the card. Elijah Rousseau, Pennsylvania Bar Association. She pulled out her phone and opened the State Bar website, typed in the bar number. The result came back immediately. Active attorney, good standing, admitted 2013, no disciplinary actions. She looked at Caldwell, her voice flat. He is an attorney, that's a legitimate bar card, and this is the attorney prep room where attorneys are supposed to be. Caldwell's face flushed. I was just verifying. No, you were assuming. Torres turned to Elijah. Attorney Rousseau, I apologize for the interruption. You have every right to be here. Elijah nodded, but his expression was hard. This isn't the first time this has happened, not just to me. I've heard from other black attorneys in this building who've been stopped, questioned, mistaken for defendants, asked to prove they're really lawyers, and it's always by the same officer. He looked directly at Caldwell. You saw a black man with files and immediately assumed I was doing something wrong. You didn't ask for my credentials first. You didn't check the sign on the door that says attorney workroom. You didn't consider that I might actually belong here. You led with suspicion and accusation. Caldwell opened his mouth to respond, but Torres cut him off. Officer Caldwell, return to your post. I'll handle this. Caldwell hesitated, then walked out, his pride wounded but his bias intact. Torres stayed behind. Mr. Rousseau, I want you to know this will be reported. What happened here is unacceptable. I appreciate that, but reporting isn't enough. I want to know how many other attorneys have been stopped by Officer Caldwell. I want to see his complaint record, because I guarantee this isn't an isolated incident. Torres nodded slowly. I've heard things, complaints, patterns, but they always get dismissed as misunderstandings. That's the problem. It's not a misunderstanding when it keeps happening. It's profiling, and I'm going to document it. Elijah checked his watch. He had 28 minutes before his hearing. He couldn't let this derail his preparation. He sat back down at the desk and returned to his notes. But the interruption had broken his focus. The rage was simmering beneath his professional composure. By the time Elijah walked into courtroom 4, He'd pushed the encounter into a compartment he could deal with later. Right now, his client needed him. The hearing lasted 90 minutes. Elijah presented his motion with precision and passion, citing case law, challenging the reliability of the identification, demonstrating the constitutional violations. The judge took it under advisement but signaled he was leaning toward suppression. Elijah had done his job well. After the hearing, Elijah went directly to the court administrator's office. He filed a formal complaint against Officer Vincent Caldwell, racial profiling, harassment of an attorney while performing professional duties, creating a hostile work environment. He requested Caldwell's full complaint history. Initially, the administrator resisted. That's personnel information. We can't just release it. Elijah's voice was steel. I'm an attorney who was profiled while preparing for a court appearance. I have a right to know if there's a pattern. And if you don't provide it voluntarily, I'll file a right to know request, and then I'll file a lawsuit that will make this a public record anyway. The administrator looked at him for a long moment, then pulled the file. 17 complaints. 16 of them involved attorneys of color being stopped, questioned, or accused of being in unauthorized areas. All dismissed, all marked as communication issues or misunderstandings. Elijah photographed every page. This isn't a communication issue. This is systemic discrimination, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows about it. Within 48 hours, Elijah had contacted every attorney named in those complaints. 8 of them agreed to participate in a joint action. All of them Black or Latino. All of them with similar stories. Stopped while preparing for hearings. Questioned about their credentials. Told they didn't look like attorneys. Accused of being in restricted areas when they were exactly where they were supposed to be. Should courthouse security officers face termination after multiple documented profiling complaints? Let me know what you think. The story broke 3 days later. Local news picked it up first. Philadelphia attorneys allege racial profiling by courthouse security officer. Then the legal blogs. Then the national outlets. The Philadelphia Bar Association issued a statement condemning the pattern of discrimination. The Pennsylvania NAACP called for an investigation. The ACLU offered to assist with litigation. Officer Vincent Caldwell was placed on administrative leave within a week. The court administration tried to contain the damage, but the evidence was overwhelming. 17 complaints, 16 involving attorneys of color, all dismissed without meaningful investigation. The pattern was undeniable. Caldwell was terminated 4 weeks after the incident. The termination letter was direct and damning. Officer Caldwell engaged in a pattern of racial profiling against attorneys of color over a 9-year period. He repeatedly questioned the credentials and presence of Black and Latino attorneys while performing their professional duties. He created a hostile and discriminatory environment. His actions violated court policy, civil rights protections, and professional standards. His employment is terminated immediately. He is prohibited from working in courthouse security in any jurisdiction. Caldwell's union initially supported him, but once the full complaint record became public, they quietly withdrew. He issued a brief statement through an attorney. I never intended to discriminate against anyone. I was trying to maintain security. If my actions were perceived as biased, I apologize. Elijah's response was public and unforgiving. This wasn't perception. This was action. You stopped me and 16 other attorneys of color over 9 years. You questioned our credentials while white attorneys moved freely. You created an environment where we had to prove we belonged in our own workplace. That's not security. That's racism with a badge. The lawsuit came 6 weeks later. 8 plaintiffs, Elijah Rousseau, and 7 other attorneys. The claims were comprehensive: racial profiling and discrimination, violation of civil rights under federal and state law, hostile work environment, interference with the practice of law, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent supervision by court administration. The defendant was the city of Philadelphia and the court administration. The evidence was devastating. 17 complaints over 9 years, 16 involving attorneys of color, all dismissed without investigation. Caldwell's own words on security footage in several incidents revealing his bias. Testimony from the 8 plaintiffs about the impact on their ability to practice law effectively. The city settled within 5 months. $4 million divided among the 8 plaintiffs. Elijah received $600,000. He donated a portion to legal aid organizations serving communities of color. The court administration implemented comprehensive reforms, mandatory bias training for all courthouse security personnel, a zero-tolerance policy for profiling complaints, an independent review board to investigate discrimination allegations, random audits of security, stops to identify patterns. A formal apology to the attorneys who had been profiled. Elijah testified at a city council hearing about discrimination in the justice system. "I didn't expect to become an advocate for this issue," he said, his voice measured but forceful. "I was just trying to prepare for a hearing. I was doing my job. But Officer Caldwell saw a black man with files and assumed I was a threat, a trespasser, anything but what I actually was." A licensed attorney preparing to argue before a judge. He paused, looking at the council members. "I had credentials. I had a bar card. My name was on the court calendar, and I still got stopped." So imagine what happens to black defendants who walk into that courthouse. If the officers can't believe a black attorney belongs there, how do they treat black people accused of crimes? How does that bias shape every interaction in that building? The room was silent. I practiced law for 12 years before that morning. I'd appeared in that courthouse hundreds of times, but that was the day I realized that no amount of credentials would protect me from someone's assumptions. No amount of professional achievement would change the fact that some people see my skin color before they see anything else. Elijah continued his criminal defense practice, but he also became an advocate. He spoke at law schools about bias in the legal system. He trained young attorneys of color on how to document and report profiling. He pushed for reforms at the State Bar Association. He testified before legislative committees about the need for accountability in courthouse security. The video footage from the courthouse cameras became required viewing in legal profession courses. Elijah's calm dismantling of Caldwell's assumptions became a teaching moment about professionalism under pressure. His documentation of the pattern became a model for how to build a discrimination case. But his message never changed. This isn't about me having credentials. This is about a system that allowed a security officer to profile attorneys for 9 years without consequence. This is about bias so normalized that questioning a black attorney's right to be in a courthouse felt like reasonable security. This is about assumptions that operate below policy but shape who gets treated with dignity and who has to prove they belong. Officer Caldwell's career is over. That's consequence. The city paid $4 million. That's accountability. But money and terminations don't change the fact that 16 attorneys were profiled while doing their jobs. They don't erase the countless moments when we had to prove ourselves to someone who'd already decided we didn't belong. They don't address the stress of wondering every time you walk into a courthouse whether you'll be stopped, questioned, treated like a suspect instead of an officer of the court. The real question is, what changes now? Do court administrators finally take complaints seriously after 1 instead of 17? Do they finally accept that security can't be an excuse for profiling? Do they finally understand that every person in a courthouse, from judges to defendants, deserves to be treated without bias? Because if we don't fix the systems that allowed Vincent Caldwell to profile attorneys for 9 years, if we don't address the assumptions that teach people a black man with case files must be doing something wrong, if we don't hold institutions accountable for the discrimination that happens in their buildings, then we're just waiting for the next officer, the next attorney, the next pattern that takes years and multiple victims to expose. Comment below if you think one documented profiling incident should trigger immediate investigation and potential termination. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, if you think accountability matters and systemic change starts with exposure, then hit that subscribe button, because we're going to keep sharing these stories. We're going to keep demanding better. We're going to keep fighting for a world where a defense attorney can prepare for a hearing without being told he doesn't look like he belongs. This isn't just about one security officer or one attorney. It's about all of us and the assumptions we refuse to challenge.